kind of the charm on this one. We're going to go back and we're going to visit RIAA. So right now I am doing a PhD. I am doing a PhD on what's inside the Lumen database and how a lot of this stuff works and how people are using this whole database to kind of see where they go and what their story is and how they use it. And we started looking at RIAA. If you look at the MPA video, we talked about the non-compliant percentage coming in at somewhere around 34% of all notices that in this database that are non-compliant for one reason or another. And one of the big reasons, not for the other, is we go through just RIAA. I've got one on MPA, and I find this interesting because these are our two big holding companies, and a reasonable assumption that they actually do own the copyright to performance of these things is that non-structural compliance with the law is turning into a really interesting theme all the way through this in terms of how the bigger companies are sending DMCA notices, and Google is actually acting on them, but they're non-compliant. So a lot of them either don't have dates, don't have original URLs, and in many cases simply just are blank and empty items. They don't even have an allegedly infringing URL. So we have no idea what they were thinking when they did this, but they paid money for this. And this is the interesting part of it, right? They actually did this is their thing, but we ended up with no real information to work on. Right? There's nothing here for me to work on. I have a copyright claim that's empty, and so I don't know what they're looking for. And as you kind of go through this, you see this as kind of a pattern all the way through, and you can reasonably assume that they do own the copyright or the ability for performance on this, but we keep on missing things. There are a lot of things that are missing. In terms of how this works. Now we do know, so Mariah Carey I think is pretty good here. This is a good solid one, right? We have a description, we have the artist, they don't care about the kind of music, it's always unspecified, the kind of work. I haven't seen one that says music. I've seen in the kind of work that people have given big long explanations on the fact that they own the copyright to that, especially on the smaller ones. But we do kind of see, and it's interesting to hear that they're using original iTunes files for this. Taylor Swift, no original URLs, but on Vimeo. And one of the things we noticed is that they did take down some of these things already, especially on the ones that were issued today. Wildest Dreams was pulled down almost immediately from Vimeo. So kind of neat that Vimeo is actually working on this. But the original part, though, and this is the problem, if we believe RIAA is actually the copyright owner of the just video Wildest Dreams with this link, we don't know that. There's no assertion or attestation that they actually own the copyright to that. So they're just kind of working, and they're just kind of doing their thing, and Vimeo's doing their thing. But the problem is that structural noncompliance, and that's the fascinating part to this, right? Is that if you go through and just randomly pick, right, just randomly pick a bunch of these things, you'll notice that some are structurally compliant, some are not. And how do you do this? Where do you go with it? So like this one, structurally compliant, it has a good date, it has a good original URL, but my belief is that this would now belong to Apple, right? As we kind of go through this, and where do we go with it? Right? Where do we take this? Some are not. We don't really have a real good idea on what they're planning on doing. They're using iTunes to assert their copyright, and that's also fascinating as you kind of go through this. In terms of how this works, why use iTunes for that attestation of copyright, and then others that are just why send this? What is the point? MP3 hamstring. A lot of these sites are dead too. A lot of these things are pretty old. So, again, why? And that's the interesting question. I don't know the answer to that question. And this is where this gets to be fascinating for me. This is why this PhD is so absolutely fascinating, is you have this mix mash of things that look like in some cases they're compliant and in many cases they're not.